Hellos. Dutugo Mgiba here, director and founder of Mgiba Law, as well of the meeting of the Legal Minds Foundation. And welcome to our Legal Minds podcast. Today, we are graced with the presence of Madam Lindiwe Vilakazi today, and we'll be discussing a very important thing regarding property transactions. I think it's as an attorney, we get approached by many people who get into these type of transactions, and then somewhere along the lines they fall into some sort of issues. Because there's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of education, there's a lack of knowledge when it comes to these type of transactions. It's very intricate. It's not as simple as I'm buying a car or I'm buying a cell phone from a friend. I just give him the money, he gives me the object, So we need to. We've always felt that we need to educate our people about it. There's not enough education around property transactions, especially for the first-time homeowners or home purchases. So today we've got Lindiwe Vilakazi here, who I've known for some time, and she's going to just share some light on us about these type of transactions. So, Lindy, how are you?
All good, thank you, and thank you for inviting me and having me. It's going to be an interesting topic because a lot of the times in my profession, I get a lot of people asking me, how do I get into property? And that already tells you, there's quite a lacking in knowledge about the property industry and getting into it and what it is exactly. And also, as you know, with Legal Minds, and I think we've discussed this previously, just the legalities around getting into property. So very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So please tell us about yourself, ma'am.
Well, I'm Spesihle Lindiwe Vilakazi. Yes, and that's my name on LinkedIn should you be looking for me. So it's Spesihle Lindiwe Vilakazi, yes. But most call me Lindy. It's much more easier than Usihle or Spesihle. But yeah, it's Lindiwe Vilakazi. And I am the founder of Kelgro, which is a property consulting and construction consulting company. So we assist people within the property realm, so getting into property and also the development and building of their properties. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you get into this industry?
Whew.
And how long have you been in there for?
Listen, it's quite a funny story because I come from a totally different background. Okay. My history is in travel management. That was my profession for the longest of time, about a decade. And I always knew I wanted to get into the property industry, but never really knew how until I actually left the travel industry and actually purchased my first property. And like most people, I really did not know what I was doing. All I knew is that I wanted to own a property. I knew I wanted to own a property for investment, but my info or my knowledge around investment was so lacking. I did make quite a lot of mistakes, but luckily, I've managed to grow my knowledge. I studied in some of these, and now I actually consult. So for a period of time during COVID, whilst I was actually doing my studies, I started a little live session on the internet, or should I say Instagram, which I'm no longer on, which is HouseIt. Some of you might remember me from the HouseIt podcast or HouseIt live sessions and stuff like that. And that was purely because during COVID, that was a time where people who had invested wrong in property were now losing their properties and stuff like that. And it was all due to lack of knowledge around, their contracts, number one, with the banks or what they'd actually invested in. And that was really heartbreaking to see. And so it was very imperative for me to try and say, hey, whatever little knowledge I have, I'm going to share it and hopefully save somebody the burden of losing a potential good investment.
I think also during the COVID period, there was a I guess people who bought their houses beforehand, and we'll get into the whole interest rate thing. I think they had a flexi, I don't know what they call it.
The interest rate.
The interest rate wasn't fixed.
It wasn't, Or well, they probably would have had a fixed interest rate, which then you would have sort of like messed yourself up a bit.
Yeah, and then during the COVID, things were fluctuating. And I think a lot of people, that's when, they bond repayment amount started fluctuating,
And I mean, that also just speaks to the understanding of what you're getting into. So as we sort of like get into beyond the OTP and now when you're signing your bonds and stuff like that, what you need to understand with that and what fixed means and when you should get it and when you shouldn't get it and so forth. So
I think COVID actually forced us to learn a lot about that interest rate situation, what interest is, because a lot of people they just end up getting into a bond, or they signed OTP, they get an acceptance from the bank without actually taking into consideration what the interest the bank is giving them.
I mean, I think people get into these contractual agreements, which are legally binding in so many aspects, with not too much thought. Property has been for the longest of time very aspirational. So it's very much linked to emotions when people invest in property, or let me say when people buy property, because I do believe there's a difference between buying a property and investing in property. So a lot of the times people actually buy property. And for me, the difference is just knowledge. Knowledge turns it into an investment. So knowledge from start to finish. What are you buying, and what's the agreements between you, your attorneys, and the banks and so forth. That's the difference between buying property and actually investing in property, and also just understanding what property actually is. Right?
Definitely. I think so we need to start this from the beginning. All right. I think we're all over the place, but let's start it from the beginning. Here I am, Dutogo Mgeba. I want to buy property, right? For whatever reason, I want to buy property now. I think I've got some money in the account. My credit is looking good. So what are the few things that I need to take into consideration when I start this process?
So firstly, I want to also just say we're going to be loosely using the term property, because I know some people who are very anal will be like, it's not property, it's real estate. And I've always sort of had a gripe with the word real estate, because I'm kind of like, American type of thing. But honestly, really, if you actually look up the definition and stuff like that, it is real estate, because property tends to be a little bit more encompassing. It has other elements into it. So there's movable and immovable properties and so forth. So it's like the umbrella of ownership, right? Whereas real estate actually kind of brings it down to say it's an actual built structure that you're actually sort of buying into. But we tend to use the word property, I think, in this country more than anything. So that's why you'll find like agents and stuff like that. They'll be like real estate agents, because they're differentiating as to what it is that they're selling. So property basically is, or could be, an asset. And I say could be because most people just automatically assume that if you own a property, you're owning an asset. That is not true. Again, goes back to that whole base of knowledge. So property in this regard, we're speaking on real estate. So it is owning a property in terms of whether you're buying in a sectional title, you're buying a freehold, which we've got the two differences there. If you're buying in a sectional title, as most people, especially first-time home buyers, would afford the sectional title. So the sectional title scheme was developed for, almost trying to bridge that gap of equity, having our history with previously disadvantaged individuals and so forth. So it was a scheme. So it's almost kind of like a property stockful. Okay. Right. I always equate sectional schemes to stockfuls, because it's a group of people buying a real estate, and you own the one house, another person owns the other house, and then we communally own communal spaces. So the parking spaces, so the land basically gets broken down into little pieces, and each and every individual of the so-called stockful buys a portion of that but then there's also going to be the communal shared spaces, which then translates into why then in sectional title schemes we have things like levies and all of that. But we'll get into that in another topic. Whereas then there's freehold, which I think has become very unpopular because of security reasons in this country, which is very, very, very sad because I'm very pro freehold. But yeah, freehold is literally where most of us grew up, right? Most of our parents had freehold properties, meaning that they owned the entire space of the land from the driveway to everything. They shared it with nobody. We didn't have a makelwane that we had to actually be paying levies with and all of that, which again, you know, it's an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time, because we then don't have the knowledge of then levies and what that holding property together means and how we are all responsible for the upkeep of such. So basically, property in this regard, I think we'll just stick to that. You either owning in a sectional title or you're owning in a freehold. And this is just for the everyday person, because there's also other elements in terms of there's commercial property, there's industrial property. You know, there's so many levels of property. It's so layered, but I think we'll just focus on the residential
I think
side.
we're going to have further discussions in later episodes about the different types of properties and which ones are good for investment, which ones aren't good for investment. But you did touch on a thing called levies. Yeah. Right. So, you know, there's levies, there's rates and taxes. Can you just explain what those are and what are the importance of knowing what those are? So if I'm going to buy a property and I'm told there's a levy on this property and there's also homeowners, rates and taxes. What do why do I need to know the importance of that when I buy the house or the property?
You know, I think it's one of the things why so many people, as I've mentioned before, during COVID had actually even started losing their properties. And it's not understanding the cost implications of actually owning a property. And because, you know, sectional title schemes aren't necessarily a traditional thing that we grew up with, we don't have the knowledge of what a sectional title scheme is, right? I mean, maybe people who had owned property previously, like in your Hillbros and stuff like that, when there were the places to own, they understood what levies were and rates and taxes. Well, rates everybody should genuinely understand because you have to pay, you must buy. But in terms of levies has been the downfall or the kryptonite of many first-time home owners. People get excited that they can afford the property because it's in a sectional title scheme. It looks a certain way and all sorts of things that they can tick on their box of wants. But the one thing that for some reason never really gets explained to people pre-buying, right, is that you're going to have now the added expense of paying levies and even understanding what levies are. So imagine we are in this stokvel together, right? Just like in a stokvel, there's administration, there's certain costs that come with managing this entire thing and also just upkeeping this scheme that we've come across, we've come together to put together. So levies are collected on a monthly basis and they're predetermined. Usually even with the developers, they can predetermine what the levies should cost more or less based on historicals in the area and so forth and whatnot. But it also varies depending on the types of properties that you've actually bought. So how the properties are built, whether it's face brick or it's painted properties, right? Because if it's ones that need to be painted every now and again, your levies might be higher. And that's where sometimes special levies kick in and so forth to accommodate that. If you have a swimming pool in your sectional title scheme in your complex, then that needs maintenance. Do you guys have gardens, or is it mostly paved? Because now you're going to have garden teams and stuff like that. Do you want security? You have to pay for the security company. Do you want electric fences? You get what I mean?
So it's all the communal lands, exclusive use areas, all that has to be maintained, right?
That's all those portions. So as when you pay your levies and it's say 1,500 or 7,000 whatnot, it's been broken down into those small portions of we're going to pay our security guards, we're going to pay our garden team, we're going to pay the management company that's actually going to be managing the scheme. So there's a whole scheme, sectional title scheme that that has to be managed. So you have the managing agents who then facilitate how you all sort of get into the scheme. So then you'll have things like where people are electing trustees. So the body corporate forms first, which automatically by being an owner, you're part of the body corporate. But then within the body corporate, the prefects will be your trustees that get elected and so forth. But the people that need to be paid is actually because trustees don't get paid. It's the most thankful job ever. The management company to manage your guys' books, to give you guys reports on a monthly basis, financial reports and all sorts, communication that needs to go out, following up on defects in terms of payments from other owners in the property, right? In the property schemes. All of that costs money, and that's what levies are covering. But also, one thing about levies is the maintenance and the upkeep of the investment. Because, you know, God forbid you guys are not paying your levies and now the roof is coming apart, paints and whatnot, it becomes harder to sell off that property. You might end up even selling a property at less than the price that what you actually bought it at. So sectional title schemes incur levies, meaning that it's the thing that helps everybody keep the value of what they've invested in or bought in, right? So that's what levies cover. But then now we also have the rates and taxes. Yeah. That's a whole, and people are like, but I'm already paying rates and things that has nothing to do with the upkeep of your actual property. Masipala is basically now your sewers, your waste collections and so forth, right? So the upkeep of your lights, the fact that you guys will actually be having lights and so forth. So the rates and taxes are separate. This is now paid to government. It's not a personal fund for the maintenance of your investment. So that's the difference. And people need to start understanding that there's going to be those two payments that come out beyond your bond. So technically there's like 3. Now you've got your bond, you've got rates, which I think all of these should really be non-negotiable, but people sort of negotiate based on how much they have in their pockets at the time. So those are the 3 things that most people need to be very aware of. And it's not to say that if you buy into a freehold, you're not going to have these expenses. Just like a sectional title scheme, you will have to obviously pay your bond, which includes insurances and whatnot. Please do pay your bonds. And then you will have to pay your rates and taxes. Please pay your rates and taxes. And you also need to be paying your own little levy, right? You have the luxury of missing a payment or 2 with yourself because you are the one holding yourself accountable because you're the sole owner of this property, right? But technically you genuinely should be having that levy for yourself because geyser burst, yes, maybe the insurance might cover it if you have insurance on that and stuff like that. But a house is like a baby. It'll get sick. It'll have certain things that happen and stuff like that. And also refurbishing the house, painting the house, keeping up, the lawn, keeping up things. You should be having a fund that you know that you're setting aside to maintain your house. And I think most people do neglect maintenance when it comes to property, which I think is something that we can really unpack at a later stage. But sure, guys, I wish you wouldn't neglect maintenance because it could be the deal breaker between whether you sell at profit or you sell at a loss at a later stage, right? All those little nigglies, if they're not taken care of, do depreciate the value of what you've actually now bought into.
So going back to the question, so if I'm buying a house, right? So it's imperative that I ask the agent or the seller to give me statements of what the rates and taxes are and what the levies are. But then do we also need to ask if the complex is owing in terms of levies? You know, there's a lot of, I know that with my firm, we have been approached by a lot of managing agents or body corporates to help with the collections of the levies. So can one say, I want to know if, I want to see how many people are owing levies and what the amounts are. Can one ask that from an agent?
It should be the ultimate thing if you're buying into a sectional title scheme, right? And also if you're buying into a freehold, ask for the municipality statement.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
So you should be asking for those things. But also here's another challenge. Some people don't know how to read what do you call it, statements. You know what I mean? So some people won't know how to read those accounting documents to see what's what and so forth. So this is where property consulting comes in. So as mentioned previously, Kelgro is a property consulting firm, and this was purely born out of the lack of knowledge of basic knowledge, right? So we're not necessarily financial advisors or anything. We're just the hand-holding partner that says, if you're going to do this, try and do it right so that you're not buying, but you're investing. We give you that basic knowledge to then empower you in knowing that what you've bought into actually makes sense. It's not an airtight thing, because like anything in life, economies change and all of that, and things can go haywire. But at least you know what you're investing into is something that you can maybe just leverage at some point, whether you've grown equity or whatever, right? So definitely everybody should, and it generally should be something now, I think, that should be passed as a law, to say that agents shouldn't be able to sell properties, whether it's a sectional title schemes or whatnot, without actually giving the buyer the full statement of what the financial history of that sectional scheme, you know. So you should be able to do that, and it's the biggest messaging right now. Ask if you're buying into sectional title schemes, because I think the numbers are really astounding. I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers right now, but a majority, I think it's like over 43% of like sectional title schemes are like collapsing. And a lot of them collapsed during the COVID era and stuff like that, where people couldn't service all of the requirements of levies and all of that. But a lot of sectional title schemes are collapsing simply because of delinquent owners who are not paying into the scheme. The last thing, and it's the worst thing you can ever get into, is get into a complex that is now failing, where the people are now only selling because they're running away from the financial woes of what's gone on. Mismanagement is another big thing when it comes to sectional title schemes. I think you know my sentiments around sectional title schemes, right? You know, you generally buy into the schemes and stuff like that, and especially for first-time home owners and all of that. But for me, I think, you know, I'm one who advocates for a lot of policy change around sectional title schemes, around qualifications, in terms of people's credits, history, and financial knowledge when buying into sectional title schemes, because sectional title schemes, as previously mentioned, were developed to bridge that gap for affordability, especially for previously disadvantaged. But I think it's almost balancing out now. It's really a free for all. But if we don't have regulations around who gets to buy into the scheme and who gets into a scheme, I always make this analogy to say, what are the chances that if you do not know me and I say, hey, I'm running a stokvel, you're just going to come and say, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're paying in 5,000 rands a month. You're going to try, you've never met any of the people that are in the stokvel with me. So you're going to trust me saying, oh, hey, we've got a stokvel, we're paying 5,000 rand a month, that when comes your turn to now cash in on that stokvel, it's going to work out. So sectional title schemes for me are pretty much similar. Why are we getting into them when we don't know the financial history or financial literacy of the people that we're getting into these so-called stokvels or schemes with? You know, that's for me, that's policy fails in that regard. But I think that conversation is so important, and I think that we'll probably have to unpack it at a later time. But we mentioned agents, right? I think sometimes people, especially the attorneys, you know, people who have to deal with the purchasers, you know, and the sellers of properties. We feel that sometimes that these people are not given all the necessary information from the agents. You know, I think I'll give you an example, right? And maybe this is not the agent's fault. Maybe it's not. You know, the agent takes what the seller gives them, right? So I have a friend who bought a beautiful house
somewhere in Joburg. And after the registration took place and everything, I think the first municipal statement, which came like 3 months later, there was a water bill of like 50 grand, and he's now saying, why am I owing so much money? I mean, after some time, it turned out there was some sort of leakage underground that he didn't know of. But then when they went back to the agent and they, there was a back and forth, and then they sent statements, and the statements showed that the previous owner was paying for like the last 3-4 months before the registration took place. They were paying about 40 grand, 50 grand for water, on a freestanding house. But the question was, why was that never disclosed to if you were going to buy a house and you were told, the water's owing every month, the water amount is going to be 50 grand.
I'll stop you there, Tutu. It is not the agent's job. Let me tell you.
Okay.
That's not what a real estate agent's job is.
Okay.
They are salespeople. Okay. They are salespeople. They are there to sell you. They facilitate the transaction, between the seller and the buyer. So is the seller supposed to tell the agent these kind of defects? I'm glad now, the laws have since recently sort of been amended and updated. Now it's mandatory for estate agents to include possible defects that would be found on the property. So I know you speaking about things like the water and all of that. We'll get back to that. But actually, no. Remember I said to you, you have to request for the bank's, not for the bank statement. Yeah. You have to request for the municipality statement. Firstly, now you found the thing. Can we take it back a little bit?
Okay.
With the whole process of then buying the property, because I want to get into the sequencing, which usually is what has tripped people up in terms of making losses when getting into property. So first and foremost, I always say when people say they want to buy a property, why are you buying the property? For what reason? Are you wanting to leave it at a later stage to your children or to your family? Are you wanting to invest and make money out of it and stuff like that? Is your primary residence? Why are you buying into this? What are you hoping to get out of this this big investment? It's weird. I mean, if you're getting married, you sort of ask a lot of questions as to why are you merging yourself with this partner. Most bonds last longer than most marriages. A bond is 20 years. Most marriages don't even make it anywhere near that. But for some reason, this is the least researched investment or marriage that people sort of get into. I don't know. If I'm going to be tied down to something or somebody for that long, I'd like to know as much about that person as possible. So get to know as much about that property as possible. And again, real estate agents, the good ones will give you everything. They'll give you the statements. They'll give you the plans. I love those ones that give plans. Oh, real estate agents, please, still my plans. I shouldn't have to ask you for the municipality statement or the plans and stuff. It should be standard, right?
Are plans only for the sectional titles, or so when you say plans, what are the plans that you're speaking of?
I'm talking about the drawing plans of the property, so the architectural plans of the property. Thankfully, also now the law has also stated now officially plans have to be provided for. So gone are the days where people would be buying into properties only to find out Uguti, there's an illegal building and so forth and all of that, and really now people who've bought previously are the ones that are lost right now, because if they're wanting to actually sell, they're going to have to now incur that cost of finding an architect who will then draw what's on site. And guess what? It's like a new plan, because now it still has to go and be passed at municipality. So if there's anything that is not passed and that was on your land, it might actually be demolished. You might have to incur the cost of having to demolish that. So I'm quite grateful that they are revising property laws and stuff like that, and what, trying to protect buyers and so forth going forward. So definitely now I'm so glad that law has been passed, or that policy had been passed to say people need to actually have plans of their properties and stuff like that. It's part of the regulation.
So what about people in the townships though? I know we're going a bit off topic here. A lot of people in the townships, they build back rooms there, and I can guarantee you, and I know this from personal experience from the clients that I have, a lot of the estate transactions and also property transactions that those back rooms that have been built for obviously rental purposes have not been, well, there's no building plans at the municipality. So there's no building plans, there's no approval. So if that person had to sell that property, what would happen? Would they now have to go back and go to tell the municipality that there's building plans? Or can one just do the transaction without the municipality knowing?
You know, there's levels to this thing, ne? Yeah. There's levels to this thing. And the township, it's like the Wild West.
It's got its own economy. Yeah.
It's got its own economy. It's got its own policies and stuff like that. I'm hoping to actually see that change because, you know, one of my biggest things that I'm trying to demystify to a certain extent is that, you know, whenever you hear property, you hear location. I have a small philosophy to say location is what you make it, right? The township being such a free for all and being such a Wild West, and it reflects in the value of the properties in that parts of our country, right? In the townships, where you look at Sandton, there's a lot more regulation. You can't do certain things because of whatnot. That speaks to value because those regulations are for the preservation of value of what people have invested into. So if those regulations are there and are the one thing that actually preserves or increases, you know, we say property appreciates the value of what's being held. Don't you think the same would happen if now regulation had to be enforced in the townships to say, guys, you can't be just building all willy-nilly, you know, selling Noma Ganjani with these backroad agents and stuff like that. So for me, policy really does matter, and I hope that it actually finds its way to trickle down and stuff like that. And I really am appreciative of institutions like Omastandi and stuff like that fund township developments, you know, because they will not fund you until you actually have the rights, you know, because it speaks to zoning, right? So briefly, I'm going to touch on to zoning because that in itself is a topic on its own. It factors on so many things. But now we're speaking on the residential part. So there's about, I think, 4. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 when it comes to zoning rights and stuff. So the degrees, it's tiered into what can be built on this portion of property that you've been given, right? So if it's Res 1, and also again, here's another thing, it depends where you are. It depends how big the portion of the property is, right? As to what can be built on there. So a lot of the times you'll find that, you know, township backrooms and stuff are infringing on laws because you're Res 1, but you've got like 10 units plus a main house where technically all you should be having is just one additional unit and the property and stuff like that. And that speaks to densification. And what most people don't understand, and yes, it is empowering to be able to have previously disadvantaged people within the township being able to secure some sort of income, right? And getting into the property market. I advocate for that. I love that. But at the same time, let's understand, because we're also speaking about municipality, there is planning that goes around municipality in terms of servicing of sewer and infrastructure, right? So half of the time, and you're having to be jumping over unsavory water just flowing. It's because that infrastructure has been inundated. Now it's too many things where there should be only 100 toilets flushing. Now there's 1,000 toilets flushing, but no budget by government has been set aside to improve, because guess what? Plans speak to saying, oh, there is this many houses here, meaning there's this many toilets, there's this many dustbins collection, right? There's this many dustbins.
Electricity also.
there's this many heaters being plugged and stoves and whatnot and all of that. Then once government knows, okay, we've approved, because remember now, plans need to be approved, right? Government looks into their development plans for that area to say, oh, okay, it seems we're getting so many plans. There's going to be about 1,000 new properties coming in, homes or units, whatever, coming into this area. In our budget planning, when we are asking government for funds and stuff like that in this municipality, we need to now increase, because we can show and say, this is how many, we're getting highly densified in this area. This is how much we need to be able to upgrade the systems. So half of the time, it's a catch-22 where people speak about service delivery and all of that, and not understanding how much they factor negatively into the lack of service delivery. How am I going to assist you if I don't know? Right? Because government or municipality workers aren't necessarily the people that are walking in the streets and stuff, or the decision makers when it comes to funding and so forth, aren't necessarily the people that are walking around in the streets and saying, oh, there's 10 more properties coming here, there's 100 more thingies here. So the only way for them to know is for us to be submitting plans, for us to be getting that permission to build those things, so that they can then put into budget for upgrades to our systems and so forth. So that Wild West mentality, I'd love for that to genuinely change.
Yeah, because I think at the municipality, those I have a difference between business rates and residential rates, right? So I think that's also very important, because I can give you an example. There was I can't even say it's a client, it's actually my parents. They had a property and it kind of burned down. And then when we were trying to claim from the insurance, they came back. The insurance guys never want to pay you anyway. So they came back and said, no, you never registered this property as a business, because it was rented out. You never registered it as a business. It was just as a residential. That became a big issue in its own. I mean, eventually the whole thing was sorted out. So it also has those kind of ramifications going down. And if you don't register it, because if something happens, if it burns down, the insurance companies might come. I mean,
Yeah, but you see, another thing about not necessarily registering and declaring all of that is. Why do I keep losing my chain of thought? I had a very, very valid point.
I think because we're going on topic. Yeah, cool.
No, I had a very, very, very important point to bring out. You're just saying, rate, right?
Yes.
Okay, so another very important point when it comes to why people should be submitting their plans and stuff like that, and sometimes they actually avoid that, is to run away from rates, right?
Yes.
So if now you have more property on your stand, right? You've got 5 toilets now, not one, meaning that the sewers are collecting more sewer. Your dustbins, now one of those pick it up, trolley bins and stuff like that is not necessarily enough. Now we need to, so when people are collecting the refuse and stuff like that, they're no longer collecting just one. Now they're collecting 2 or 3. You see what I mean? So obviously your rates will increase. So some people avoid submitting to municipality for the fear that, it will increase the municipality rates. So regulation is trying to crack down on that. So legally, you shouldn't be doing that, because you setting yourself up for failure. Like you're saying, now when you're trying to claim for certain things and so forth, because you didn't go the right route, trying to save on that extra 100 rand or 300 rands extra that would have been levied on you. Now you're losing out really big, but also you're affecting everybody else around you negatively, because as we mentioned, we're inundating the infrastructure with more toilets, more electricity demands, and all of that that has not been catered for by municipalities. So
no, that's definitely a conversation for another
time.
Guys,
Batalan. Mara still, I have a huge gripe with municipalities, but
I think that's a very important conversation. Now that I'm thinking about it, now that we're having this conversation, I think it's very important to have this conversation
There's so many like legal things that people take for granted, and they're just thinking, oh, it's just red tape. But there's
reasons for
there's a methodology towards why we regulate the way that we actually regulate it and so forth. So, man, beyond understanding why you're buying into things and stuff like that, like understand what it costs and why things are actually run the way that they are, so that you begin to understand property a lot more differently. And you have, I think once people, a lot of my clients after consultations and stuff like that, right? It's almost like you've lit a light. You've lit a light, like, so this is why things. And I feel like genuinely, if government really wanted to collect more when it comes to outstanding rates and all of that, education would be the biggest thing that they could actually give to people, which is why HouseIt was also started, right? Because also as property owners, I think we're also responsible, because if you want to protect your investment, educate the people that you have invested in, because even though you're investing into a freehold, right, on that street, if only you really understand the value of property and the ins and outs and all of that, you'll be very frustrated when your neighbors don't upkeep their properties, when your neighbors don't pay municipalities and so forth. So education is really the one preservative when it comes to preserving property and ensuring appreciation, or the holding of value.
Okay, no. Like I said, we've deviated a bit, but let's get back to me buying this property. So the Vilakazi found a piece of land or whatever.
So you've determined your why.
Yes.
Or why are you buying?
Yeah, so I'm buying it because I want to move in with my wife and children, 15 of them.
Start a whole family. So, okay, you started a family. 15, you started a clan.
So now I'm with the agent. I know we had a brief conversation with the agent. I wanted to ask you what an agent is, but I think we need to have a conversation at another time about agents.
But just remember, agents are salespeople, guys. Agents, they're salespeople. Yeah. They're there to sell. They're facilitating. Remember, they earn a commission, right? They're there to collect their commission. It is not their responsibility to handhold you, to help you figure out the why of why you're actually buying into whatever property.
I think, I would love to have a discussion, but with a panel. Yeah. We have agents and property specialists. So what do you call yourself? Property specialists,
consultants.
Right? Consultants.
I'm a property consultant.
So agents, property consultants, and the conveyancers.
Please,
just to have a discussion about. I think there's a lack of communication, especially from the gap between from the time the person signs an OTP up until they actually sit down with the attorney to sign whatever legal documents, right? And I think time is not allowing us to go into that aspect, but. So we get back to my scenario.
But I'll help you out there quickly, which brings us back to what we're talking about. But the missing link, right? It might seem biased. It might seem like I'm self-promoting to a certain extent. I am. But the missing link is property consultation, right? Yeah. So property consultants are that missing link.
So would you say agents are property consultants?
No, they're not.
Okay. They just
they're agents. So they're real estate agents. No, and just as much as the banks as well, right? They're not for the buyer or the seller and stuff like that. They are just there to facilitate the transaction. Yeah. Property consultation speaks to, I'm going to then guide you and explain to you why you're doing what you're doing and how to do what you're doing in the best way to meet your goals of why you want to actually do what you're wanting to do, right? So we as property consultants are that link to the estate agents. So first and foremost, obviously, I've said, if I consult people, why? Right? We've covered the why. Then how much do you have? Or how much can you afford? Yeah. And here's where a lot of people get tripped up, right? They think that if they've pre-qualified for $1 million, that is what they're affording. But that's not always the case. What you pre-qualify for is not what you can afford. So the property consultant's duty as well is to, we're not there to sway you and make your mind up for you, because we are not financial advisors. You still need to approach financial advisors who are registered with FSPs and stuff like that. But as a property consultant, I'm a guide. I'm a coach. Because let me tell you something, in this game of property, nobody is looking out for the seller. Right?
Seller or the purchaser?
Sorry, the buyer.
Okay.
In this game of property, nobody's looking out for the buyer, to be very, very, very honest. Like I said, the estate agents, and I know there's very good ones who genuinely do look after their clients, and not to discount them, but majority are just there for the commission. So they're there for the commission. They've been appointed by who? The seller. Okay. Then you come into your conveyancings and attorneys, right? Who appoints that? It's the seller, right? That's all done by the seller. So everybody's seemingly on the seller's side on that, right? But nobody's really sort of hand-holding even the seller needs hand-holding to a certain extent, because as much as, yes, it might seem like everything is on their side, but nobody's hand-holding the buyer and saying, okay, understand what you're going to be signing here on the OTP. Okay, first, why are you buying? Secondly, how much can you afford? Emphasis on afford. You cannot afford this. Yes, you qualify for that, but you afford this. So let's redirect your attentions to this location. Where are you buying? Matters as well.
Definitely.
Because you do not want to buy in the wrong area. No matter how much maybe you like that area, we look at the historics and the performance of that area so that we can guide you to say, okay, maybe with your affordability, because sometimes affordability will restrict you, but with your affordability, this is where you should be buying. And this is why you should be buying, because then we can pull up market reports for that area. And then when it comes to now finding, we work with the agents, with the estate agents to say, listen, my client is looking for this, because now we've set out your property goals of why you're buying, how much you can afford, where you should be buying. Now we take that information through to our bond originators and the estate agents, right? And we say, this is what we're looking for. Help us find this. They source out the properties for us. When they source it out, it's us that filter what has been brought back to us to say, oh, okay, no, it meets the criteria. Okay, here, client, go do your viewings and all of that. This is why we think this property will work according to the consultation that we've had with you and so forth. Obviously, we've qualified for whatever amount and everything. And then we also then facilitate what we were previously speaking about. We ask for the municipality statements. We ask for the plans, because now here's another thing. Most people do not know how to read plans. You can give them plans and show them the house. But to mix those two and say, it matches, right? Because now suddenly the bathroom is not where the bathroom was. There was a minor extension that was done or whatever and stuff. So also now what then goes into the OTP might just be different. You know, so now the houses may be smaller or might be bigger. You want to know that when you are now saying, I want to make an offer on this property, and the estate agent gives you the offer to purchase, which we say it's the OTP, right? Everything that's on that document, because it is a legally binding document, you are binding yourself. It's technically the prenup to this marriage that you're going to be having with this property, right? You want to know that the terms and conditions of this, I'm getting what it is, right? So if it says your stand is 1,000 square meters big,
you must.
How do you know that stand is 1,000 square meters big? Right. So
that's when you guys come in, do the actual calculation.
Do you know what a site development plan is? Do you know how to read, where your house has been pegged? Because here's another thing that happens. Half of the time you find your neighbor encroached on your land, and they built slightly into your land and stuff, right? That person should be paying you rent. You're owning a piece of my land. You should be paying me. Or move ibondalako, because now I'm being told this is 1,000, because now you've bought into this and you're wanting to sell later, and somebody's actually now gone and gotten a property consultant, or they're very informed about property and they say, well, hang on, no, I'm not going to buy this because
this is the situation.
You're infringing on this and so forth. There's quite a lot of loopholes that people can fall into that is not necessarily offered, and it's not the duty of the estate agent, of your bond originators, of your conveyancers, your bond registrar, not the banks, not your lawyers, not the agents are responsible to teach you. The assumption is you know what you're doing. You're a grown up, you're an adult on an ID. you should know, and you can read. You should know what you're getting into. And unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Yeah, it's not. Well, look, I mean, I think our time is almost up, and I don't want to take much of your time. I know you are a busy person, but I think the next time we have a sit down, we should then talk about OTPs, the offer to purchase, the sole mandates. What's the difference between a sole mandate and the OTP? The conveyances, I think that's a very important conversation. The conveyances, the lawyers, what do they do? What are the transfer costs? What are the transfer duties? What are the bond fees? How is those calculated? I think that when I was talking about the missing link, a lot of the purchaser will sign the offer to purchase, and then they get a call a few weeks later from an attorney. And then they have to come sign whatever document, and then boom, an invoice is given to them, and they're like, what the hell? Why am I paying this? Why do I have to pay you so much money? And just as a side note, I was speaking to some kids at a school the other day, about why they should join the legal field, and telling them what we go through. A lot of the guys thought that, they said we are liars and corrupt, but they just saw us as court people, we want to wear the suits, wear the robe and drive nice cars. And I was like, I used to work at a firm, and I was maybe 1 out of 3 candidate attorneys, right? This was a conveyancing specialized firm. That's what they do, conveyancing property transactions. And I was telling them, I was 1 out of the 3 candidate attorneys. I alone saw maybe 2 or 3 clients a day, right? Alone, Monday to Friday. And each client had an invoice. And on average, the invoices were about 10K. Yeah. And they're like, what?
Yes, every day. Nah, do the math.
Every day. Do the on math. Average, you know what I'm saying? And this firm did big transactions. I'm dumbing it down to 10,000. Yeah. But then it started changing. That's what I want to do, with the legal thing, is that there's more to law than going to court and fighting and arguing with other people. There's more to law than
it's so broad. Like the legal
so
it's so broad.
Even the things that you do, construction and all that, there are attorneys that specialize in construction law. Right. You know what I'm saying? And there's also a labor aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
The people who go into the construction. So that is a whole
law is so fascinating.
Discussion to have. Yeah.
I'm gonna out myself, and no judgment zone here. But I'm a become law student dropout second year. Yes, okay. And I genuinely was having so much fun, like learning about law and so forth. And I think it's also part of what has informed why I'm such a big advocate for people actually understanding what they're getting themselves into legally when it comes to these things, because finding out at a later stage, sometimes you could escape, you could, get out unscathed and stuff like that. But 9 times out of 10, and especially, for younger people who might be the first in their family coming up and so forth, really the biggest trip up of now having to go back home because you didn't understand certain things and stuff like that is really, 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 really sad. And to prevent all of that happening, I think generally I advocate for more and more property consultants with legal background or affiliations. I mean, you're my affiliate in terms of the legal side of things and stuff like that, with the legal expertise that you bring in, to be able to consult and to bridge that gap, so that we do actually protect people, especially within property investment and all of that, and just covering people and legally as best as what we can. You don't necessarily need to know everything legal, but you just need to know the basics.
Definitely. And I think that we need more Black conveyances, please. I know apparently it's a difficult exam. I've written twice and I failed it twice, but it's because of lack of preparation. I think my dad always says nothing is difficult if you're prepared for it. So if you prepare for this exam, you will pass it. So it just needs time. It needs dedication.
But I think it's also people, when they do buy, people don't actually understand the fact that they can actually request for conveyancer. You can change who's going to be doing your
so
stuff.
Let's
so if you want to
more,
promote black conveyancing firms, ask for them.
Yeah, and the banks also need to open up to the black conveyancing firms. They need to put a lot of them on the panels.
True.
But that's a conversation, like I said, for another day.
We could go on and on and on and on.
I want to mention before we have to close shop here. The networking events. I know you came to I think it was our third one.
I've been to all of them so far, but I was a speaker at your second one.
One of them, yeah. So, I mean, from your experiences from the networking events, can you just tell us what your thoughts are, if it's something that is important to us black
Definitely
people? Like, what are your thoughts on the networking events?
I love the event. I love the idea, the concept of the event. I think at first I was quite intimidated because it was legal minds, and I thought, I'm a part of the legal fraternity. I'm a dropout. What can I contribute and so forth? But being in business and understanding opportunity and stuff like that, I got to actually see, hey man, these are the people that I work with, right? When I'm property consulting and stuff like that, I've referred so many of my clients to a lot of the people that I've networked with and met at your events. I mean, Twala and Jorge, sorry, GNT, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
There's quite a few firms or people or in fraternity in the legal side that I've met, that I've consulted and been able to pass business to, and to say, oh, these are people who are like-minded, I've met at the event and so forth. And also just how you've managed to encompass a lot of other different professions, because hey, law is so broad and it touches everything. Right? So it's a great platform, and yeah, man, kudos. I can't say it enough to you. Kudos. Thank you for that platform. And also thank you for having me as a guest speaker when you did and so forth, because it really did just open my eyes up around networking and paying a lot more attention to the legal side of things within my business as well.
No, that's good, man. No, thank you. Our next one is coming up soon. So more information will be
looking forward to it
as time goes on. But GNT, they're a bit shy, but they are supposed to come onto the show and give us some
guys,
some
beautiful black ladies
to the conveyancing aspect of it, because as far as I know, they're the only black conveyancers that I know. I think there's another firm, Shirinzi, but they're the only.
I can count on one hand the number of black conveyancing firms I know.
People that and I think that we guys who are not conveyancers need to know these firms, because we get approached a lot of the times from people who are selling properties, and then I have to refer them to firms that are not black firms. You know what I'm saying? So if I have that kind of people on my panel or on my networking list, I can say, oh, there's GNT, oh, there's Shirinzi, there's so and so. You know what I'm saying? So it's very important that they raise their hands and they say, look, we are a firm that does conveyancing. Even the big ones, the big black firms, I can't even mention which ones, but they should stick their hands up and really come to the table with us and say, okay, fine, we would like to, give our input into this field, because it's very important. It's very important. And that's the only way we're going to grow, and the knowledge will be shared. Thank you very much for coming. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to drop before we say bye. Give us your details, give everything. Where can we find you?
So as previously mentioned, I'm Spesihle Lindiwe Vilakazi. Thank you for having me again, Mr. Mkiba. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, I'm not on any social medias, guys. I do know. I'm only on LinkedIn. You can definitely either connect, message me on there. My business, as mentioned, is Kelgro. So you can find us on www.kelgro.co.za. My contacts is 074-933-4435. If you have any requirements for property consultations, you're looking to get into property, we mainly also work with property investors. So if you're looking to invest in property, build a portfolio and so forth, that is our specialty. We not only consult, but we also build and develop for investors. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for listening and watching us. I hope you guys learned a thing or two during this episode. We will continue. I think this, like I said before, this is a very important conversation to have, especially to those who are thinking about buying property. I think we're gonna also go into estate transactions, property transactions, and property transactions between divorced spouses. I mean, there's a lot to encompass, to unpack in the discussion of property transactions. But for now, thank you very much for joining us. Dutogo Mgiba here, Legal Minds Podcast. Thank you very much.